Welcome back to Study Skills for Success in College. And this is part two, the skill that affects all others, stress management. You'll recall that in our first short lecture, we looked at the first 4 of 7 topics covered in the first chapter of your textbook. And today we're going to discuss the next 2 topics, they being consider the harmful effects of stress and differentiate good stress from bad stress. So let's get started. You'll recall that in the first lecture, we established that stress is a physical and emotional reaction based on our perceptions. Let's further define stress to include 2 broad categories. So we're breaking it down into 2 categories. First, external stress, and then internal stress. Clearly, external stress is it's things outside of you, including the environment, social actions, major life events, daily hassles. And as we discussed in the first lecture, while we can't always control these things, we certainly haven't the ability or the capacity to control how we react to these things. And that was really the key. Here's an example from a recent personal experience I had. I was driving back from running an errand the other day. I noticed that the car behind me was tailgating. We've all experienced this, right? This car behind me was tailgating me. And my first instinct was, of course, to speed up, get away from this knucklehead driver. But because I was driving at the speed limit for that zone, which was 35 miles per hour, if I sped up, I'd be putting myself in the position of being pulled over for speeding, and that would cost me. So I quickly and wisely referred to the more reasonable part of my thinking, and I decided that the one who needed to change was the person behind me. He or she may have been in a hurry, but their dilemma, if indeed it was a dilemma that they had and that resulted in speeding, should not be fixed at my expense. And besides all that, I thought there are 2 other lanes. Here are the examples of external stressors that are found in your textbook: from the environment, noise, heat, bright lights, confined spaces; from social interaction, bad relationships, aggressive interactions, new social situations; from major life event, starting school, moving, getting married, getting divorced, job loss or change, family sickness or death; and daily hassles, commuting to work or school, car repairs, and paying bills. Now, clearly, internal stressors that things that are inside of you, including habits, personality traits, negative thinking styles. Here are the examples of internal stressors seen in your textbook. From habits, we have lack of restful sleep and exercise, smoking, drug abuse. From personality traits, workaholic, perfectionist, people pleaser. And from negative thinking styles, pessimistic, self critical, rigid thinking, and racing mind. We all have these temporary stressors that are both internal and external in nature. Is it maybe an upcoming exam that makes you nervous? Is it poor health? Maybe it's the health issues of a loved one that has you sleepless at night. Are you struggling with an addiction? Has someone on the job got you on pins and needles? Are you unsatisfied with your looks? I'm pretty sure that at least one of these hits home. It's so crucial that we overcome the unfortunate consequences of these negative stressors. But first, let's explore what happens when we let them get the better of us. First, we're going to discuss chronic stress, and then we'll look at stress in the workplace. And lastly, we'll look at stress and academic performance. First, chronic stress. This is a long-term state of stress. It's especially dangerous, particularly when it comes to health, but also when it comes to performance and decision making. It can affect you physically, mentally, emotionally, and behaviorally. All of these things now, what I just mentioned, physical, mental, emotional behavior, they're all interconnected. Chronic stress can affect you physically, which can change your thought patterns. There's the mental part, which can then affect your emotions, which can then in turn affect your behaviors. Again, they're all interconnected. Let's take a look at a few symptoms found in each of these categories. Under physical effects, we find sweating, muscle aches, digestive problems, loss of appetite, headache, dizziness. Under mental effects, we see anxiousness, forgetfulness, confusion, panic attacks, loss of humor, negativity. Under emotional effects, anxiety, nervousness, fear, irritability, impatience, depression. And under behavioral, increased alcohol intake, appetite changes, smoking and drug abuse, restlessness, nail biting, increased aggressiveness. Any of those sound familiar? So, chronic stress brings about these symptoms being indicators that stress is present. But what about the long term effects of chronic stress? Many say, and by many I am specifically referring to those in the medical field, they often say that the leading cause of health problems in our hectic, high-paced society is stress. Let's let's take a look at some of the research-based facts concerning stress. Let me go back to that. Chronic stress has been shown to weaken the immune system. It's estimated that heart disease causes over 30 of deaths in the U.S. Stress-related disorder of hypertension is estimated to affect as many as 65 million people. The majority of heart attacks occur on Monday mornings. Research shows that stress plays a role in osteoporosis in women. Chronic high levels of stress can contribute to weight gain. Stress also has major effects in the workplace. According to many studies, particularly those found that are given to us and seen through the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, job related stress generates more health complaints than other life stressors. Studies cited on the American Institute of Stress website indicate 80% of workers feel stress on the job, and nearly half say they need help in managing their stress. And I would like to point out that 80% of workers that feel stress on the job, within that study, the reference to 80% of workers feeling stress on the job was a reference to chronic stress. So it is that serious stress that affects 80% of workers on the job. So in this course, we'll discuss behaviors related to academic success. We're going to be focusing mostly on academic success. And we've actually already begun, haven't we? Stress management is a behavior. It probably is the most difficult for most students. But when we consider the other behaviors covered in this course, which are important, we have to compare those to this in order to be able to make that statement. That is, that stress management is a behavior, and it is probably the most important. So let's take a look at those other topics. In chapter 2, we'll discuss positive attitudes and goals. In 3, managing your resources. In 4, active study strategies. In 5, learning styles, memory, and test taking. And finally, in our last chapter that we'll cover in this course, chapter 6, creative thinking and decision making skills. But if we look at all of those, stress management is by far the most important. All the other skills are dwarfed by stress management in comparison. And it's the reason for its number one placement in the textbook. Remember our short discussion about Hans Selye, he's known as the father of stress theory. Two terms that he coined as he studied all things stress were this term called eustress and distress. Eustress is positive or good stress, while distress is negative or bad stress. So, for purposes of simplicity, we'll just refer to good stress and bad stress when referring to the types. Good stress refers to, of course, the stress necessary to all of us in order to progress and succeed through life. And bad stress is this overwhelming and counterproductive stress that weighs us down. We want to do whatever it takes to ensure that we don't get out of our good stress zone. It's when we're in this zone, the good stress zone, that we perform at our peaks at our jobs, in school, in life. But in order to get into this good stress zone and stay in it, it requires a plan. It doesn't just happen. You have to have a personalized system or a personal plan. And though it's helpful to recognize your personal stressors, be they external or internal, it's significantly more important to recognize just exactly how you react to too much stress. Your reaction to stress is a wake up call that says, hey, you need to cope with what's going on in your life before it takes over. And let's not forget that not all stress is bad for you. A little bit of stress is good while while you're performing important tasks. The key is to find the balance. Now, moderate amounts of stress are necessary for optimal performance, as I just alluded. When performers take the stage, be they musicians like this guy, or speakers, or actors, or otherwise, they are stressed. They're experiencing stress, and they want to, because they know that there's a chance they may make a mistake. And it's productive stress or good stress that produces the kind of performance that they want. And the kind of good performance that they want to produce is the avoidance of the mistakes that they will make. So, good stress is used as a tool to avoid those mistakes. In the video we're about to watch, the speaker compares the fight or flight response to what she calls the challenge response. Let's take a look at it now.
One way that the body responds to stress. Everyone's heard the fight or flight response, but it actually turns out that that's just one way that the body and brain can respond to a stressful circumstance. And it's often not a very helpful way to respond to a stressful circumstance, especially one in which you really want to rise to the challenge and perform your best, where it's really not about survival mode. And it turns out that the brain and the body actually has another way of responding to these kind of high stakes challenges, whether it's an important negotiation or you have to give a speech or an athletic competition, those moments where you really want to show up and do your best. And that other way of responding to stress is called a challenge response, that it's a way for your brain and body to give you maximum focus, attention, and energy. And it's physically different than the sort of the fight or flight response that we have when we feel deeply threatened by a stressful situation. When you have a threat response, your body and brain are shifting into the state that is really the sort of the classic association with the harmful stress response. It's going to make you more likely to choke under pressure. It's going to feel more like dread or overwhelm. When you have a challenge response, the brain and body actually shift into a state that gives you more access to your resources. Your heart might still be pounding, but your blood vessels are going to relax and open up so you get more blood flow to your muscles and to your brain. Your brain shifts into a state it's actually better at paying attention to everything in your environment rather than sort of being laser focused like you might be in a fight or flight response on what's going wrong or what's dangerous. When you have a challenge response, all of your senses open to all the information that's available to you, which means you're basically smarter under stress. And researchers have gotten really interested in figuring out how do you get people to shift from a threat response into a challenge response. Because unless your life is on the line in some sort of crazy emergency situation, it's going to be better for you to have a challenge response than a threat response. You'll perform better. And that's been shown in situations ranging from people performing surgery to athletes on the field to students taking difficult exams. When you have a challenge response, you just do better. And it seems like one of the best ways to shift from a threat response to a challenge response is actually to view your own stress response as a resource. The reason that many people have a threat response in a stressful situation is that the very first signs of anxiety, when they notice some sweat on their brow or they're starting to feel their heart pound, they think, uh-oh, I'm about to blow it, and they turn their attention to trying to calm down or trying to suppress whatever stress is arising. And research originally coming out of Harvard University has shown that when people say, okay, I'm stressed out, I feel stress happening right now, and that's a resource. That stress can actually help me do better. It actually changes the physiology of the stress response from threat to challenge, and it helps people perform better, whether they're giving a talk in public, whether they are engaging in a business negotiation, whether they're a student taking an exam. Across many scenarios, literally just embracing your own stress, energy, arousal, or anxiety can transform what's happening in your brain and body to really help you rise to the challenge.
So interesting, isn't it? And I like that she addressed the physiological reasoning behind the kind of good stress that she referred to. She said that it produces better results by doing what? Opening up the blood vessels, which in turn results in more blood flow to your muscles and to your brain. Really good stuff. I would advise that you, if you really didn't take all of that in, just rewind this and watch it again. It's just so good. All right, let's carry on. Now, going beyond the good stress zone and into the bad can be harmful. And in the last lecture, we talked about the difference between and discussed it in this one as well, the difference between the good stress and the bad stress. And we don't want to get out of that good stress zone, which we are frequently in. We need to be able to identify when that is happening. And the best way is to look for physical and emotional signs. Here's a short list of just a few of the effects of stress in the bad zone. Emphasis on the word effects, the effects of stress when you are or when you have gone beyond the good and into the bad zone. High blood pressure, heart attack, or stroke, stomach pain, lack of sleep or insomnia, decreased immune system functioning, depression and personality changes, problems with learning, and frequent headaches. Now, as I look at this list of the results of being in the bad stress zone, I would say that the ones that affect me most personally, not so much stomach pain, but I would say an upset stomach, and definitely lack of sleep or insomnia. How about you? Take a look at that list. Do you experience any of those? If you do, if and when you do, what you've done, very likely, is you transition from being in the good stress zone into the bad stress zone. There is one more lecture here. We have a part 3 in this lecture on stress management. So until then, take care, take a deep breath, and make sure that you're reading and doing the homework assignments required for this course. Let's take a look at what we learned in this particular lecture.